higher full house. 5 and 7 of spades. A straight flush.
So Bond's hand here, the straight flush. In movies, you're always going to see these huge hands. Really, the unrealistic part comes when everybody has these hands at the same time. It's like winning the lottery while getting struck by lightning. Hi, my name is Darren Elias. I'm a 4-time World Poker Tour champion, and I've been a professional poker player for nearly 2 decades. Today, we'll be looking at poker scenes in movies and TV and judge how real they are.
I'm laying this down, Teddy.
This is the famous Oreo poker tell. I guess it is worth saying that Rounders is almost unanimously the best poker movie ever made. So these guys are playing No Limit Texas Hold'em, which is the most common poker game played these days. Each player is dealt 2 cards. You're trying to make the best 5-card poker hand. So using your 2 cards in combination with the 5 community cards to make the best hand. Mikey McD laying down ace-5 there. I could see recognizing a tell and folding a good hand. That probably wouldn't be as obvious as a guy only eats his Oreos when he has the best hand. It would probably be something a little more subtle.
2 grand?
The only knock on Rounders would be bet sizing, I think, where there's $400 in this pot and Teddy KGB bets $2,000. So for a player to bet $2,000 5 times the pot on the flop, pretty uncharacteristic, doesn't happen very often. And you would think a player who Teddy KGB, although fictional, is regarded as a decent player, probably wouldn't be betting 5 times the pot here. Also, they would probably have a dealer, is the only other unrealistic aspect where they probably wouldn't just be dealing to each other.
Big Daddy. Bits?
So a lot of the scenes in Rounders are underground games, and this is a real thing. While it's not necessarily illegal to play in the game, it is illegal to run the game and to take a rake. Playing an underground game comes with a lot more risk than playing in a casino, where if you're playing in a casino, there are some safeguards where you know the dealer is probably not cheating you. There are cameras. You know that you're always going to be able to cash your chips after you win. In an underground game, you don't really have those security. I generally tend to avoid the private games because of all these pitfalls that could happen.
Check. I bet it all. I flopped the nut straight.
And Matt Damon's character here probably had in his mind that he was going to trap Teddy KGB the whole way. So just check and then call and not put in a raise, not reveal the strength of his hand. So being a bit cagey here and looking to trap. And I think if you are playing an opponent who's making big bets like that, the likelihood that they're going to continue betting like that is pretty high. So I think he probably chose a good line, as we would say here, in check calling and trapping Teddy. Yeah, Teddy KGB definitely seems a bit rattled in this scene, and it's towards the end of the heads-up match. These emotions may be starting to creep into his play. And that's really when you can win the most money from a player, when they're tilted, when they might not be on their best game. So I think that's what's happening here. I would give this scene in Rounders an 8 out of 10. Tough to be too harsh on Rounders. I think the only nitpicking thing that is wrong with Rounders is bet sizing issues, really.
The game had regulars and the game had guests.
Check a bet.
And 4 of the regulars were famous actors.
So Molly's game based on Molly Bloom running a private cash game with A-list Hollywood actors, influential people, and this is something that happens in real life, and I've encountered a few of them. I've played with Michael Phelps, Nelly, Kelly Rowland. It's tough to infiltrate these private games if you're not among the circle. Most of these celebrities or influential people do not want to lose their money to a professional poker player they don't know.
I swear on my mother's life I have you.
He's staring at his cards. Even a reasonably good amateur would know it was mathematically the best hand, which in poker is called the nut.
Fold. F you.
And it is, while frowned upon a little bit to talk like that, it's not something I do. Unrealistic that a player would fold the nuts specifically. The nuts just means you have the best possible hand at that moment. But then again, if you're in a private game and you're with players who don't really know how to play, they may not know that's the best hand. If your opponents fold, you win the pot regardless of your cards. So bluffing, very much a huge factor. I could certainly believe something like that would happen in a big private game.
The best player at most tables was about to get bluffed off the win by, of all people, Bad Brad.
I had 1 pair. The 9s in the middle.
There's always a bad Brad in the private games. So that's a good example of playing the strategy in the situation versus playing the player, where here, if he'd have just known his opponent and known that the guy doesn't really know how to play, and this becomes a pretty easy call. And this is certainly something that happens when players are not familiar with each other. You're kind of stuck playing a more simpler strategy.
Just give me 500,000. I just gotta get back to even.
That should be the second line of every gambler's obit. Harlan never did.
We see this character Harlan tailspin, lose a big pot, borrow a bunch of money, and kind of destroy his life. And that's something that, with experience, poker players have gotten used to, where we can distance ourselves from the results a little bit and realize that poker is one long game where we don't have to try to win the money back right away. I think less experienced players are more likely to go on tilts, and I definitely had trouble dealing with tilt, things like that when I was younger. I was a lot less in control of myself and my emotions. To give a higher rating than Rounders? I have to think about this. I would give Molly's game a 9 out of 10 based on those two scenes. Both scenes in a private game were things that could actually happen.
I thought we play a game. The winner decides who lives and who does not.
I would say that if a guy's handling the cards and the ace of spades is just flying out and he's trying to deal you a poker hand, I would be weary about sitting in this game.
5 card draw.
So 5-card draw, they say, which is pretty common game to be played in movies, not so commonly played anymore. I would say 5-card draw is a game that was played a lot before 2000. 5-card draw is a game where all players get dealt 5 cards. There's a round of betting, so everyone gets to make a bet, and then they can trade cards for new cards.
Dead man's hand, Mr. Wick.
Wick has aces and eights here. Dead man's hand, pretty fitting for John Wick to have that hand, as he seems to kill people by the dozens in these movies. So aces and eights is known as Dead Man's Hand, Wild Bill Hickok, I think South Dakota, Deadwood, something like that, in the late 1800s, where he was playing 5-card draw and had aces and eights in his hand and was shot in the back of the head. And from then on, it's known as Dead Man's Hand. And debated a little bit whether they were black or red or what suits or what the other card was, but I think it's kind of accepted that black aces and eights is probably what the actual hand was.
4 9s.
Royal flush. They had already lost.
Let me guess. 5 of kind?
So we had 4 of a kind, a royal flush, and 5 deuces in a 4-handed game of 5-card draw, which is pretty absurd. So to run down the hand rankings, what beats what? No pair. So this would just be a high card hand. So this is the worst hand in poker you could have. After that, it would be 1 pair. After 1 pair comes 2 pair, but loses to 3 of a kind. After 3 of a kind comes a straight, so a flush, which beats a straight but loses to a full house. After a full house comes 4 of a kind, a straight flush, and the only hand that beats a straight flush would be a royal flush. Unbeatable hand, unless you're in a John Wick movie.
Now maybe a little bit.
Probably the most realistic part of the scene is John Wick cutting the guy's throat with a playing card, where that could actually happen. Lower quality playing cards are made of like paper or cardstock, but if you're in a casino or you're playing with a nice deck of cards, they're made of plastic and they do have an edge. So a man of John Wick's skill sets could probably cut somebody with a playing card. I've seen players that can throw a card and cut through a banana or a cucumber or things like that. I'll rate John Wick a 1, I would say, just for that card throw at the end.
It was worth it to discover his talent, the twitch he has to hide when he bluffs.
It's the tell. He is bluffing.
Very obvious tell. If a guy is this good at poker that he's playing for millions of dollars, typically he wouldn't have a tell so obvious that a spectator sitting at the bar could see it. The staring element in poker can definitely seem uncomfortable to a civilian or a regular person, but it is a part of the game. Some players more than others, especially professionals, will really stare intently at their opponents. And we're really just trying to gain any information. And other players do it for intimidation factor, or maybe to make their opponents feel uncomfortable. Other players won't look at you at all. So it really depends on who you're playing against.
Full house. Kings and aces. Monsieur le chiffre.
Oops.
So a lot to unpack here. Bond has a full house here, kings full of aces, an incredibly strong hand, where he would probably put the money in no matter what, regardless of the tell, whether he knew Les Chiffres was bluffing here or not. Doesn't really matter. In poker parlance, we would call this a cooler, where two players have very strong hands and all of the money is going to go in no matter what, kind of regardless of the skill level of the player. So that part makes sense. And then also worth noting, the Bond villain here, when he tables his cards, only shows one jack and then spreads the other jack. That would be a slow roll in poker, which is very, very bad etiquette, where he's kind of saying, oh, I just had a jack here. Oh, wait, I actually have four jacks. I had you beat. So that's frowned upon, very bad etiquette. But from a Bond villain, I guess the shoe fits.
Race.
A lot of plaques going in the middle. The plaques being those plastic markers there. Those are usually used in casinos, and they're the higher denomination. Usually it goes all the way up to chips to a certain amount, and then if you're playing super high stakes, you'll get a plaque that I think in this game they're worth $500,000 or $1 million, something like that.
115 million in the pot.
Gentlemen, showdown, please.
115 million for one hand of poker is nuts, by the way. I would say that's probably an order of magnitude bigger than anything ever played. I would say there's been a lot of seven-figure cash game pots in poker in the history of poker, maybe a couple eight-figure pots. Over a 100 million, this is fantasy land in my eyes, where there's no nine-figure pots going down in poker today.
Full house, eight full of aces.
The way the dealer's manipulating the cards there and putting them into the board, not realistic. A dealer would never do that. I think it's more for the movie they wanted to show how the hands would look.
A higher full house.
Five and seven of spades. A straight flush.
And Bond comes over the top. So Bond's hand here, the straight flush, 5-7 of spades, something around 3,500 to 1 to make. So that is a rarity. And in movies, you're always going to see these huge hands, these statistical improbabilities. And really, the unrealistic part comes when everybody has these hands at the same time, where I could certainly believe someone having a straight flush and someone having a full house. But when you start to add in multiple players having all of these good hands, it's like winning the lottery while getting struck by lightning.
Steve. Thank you very much.
Tipping is very common in poker. It's a big part of the culture. In cash games, I think Bond tipping $500,000 here after this hand is nuts. I don't think I've ever seen a tip like that. I would say if you win a big tournament where you're winning millions of dollars, there could be a big tip in a scenario like that because players might tip 1 or 2%, 1.5% of the winnings. I think the most I've ever tipped is probably $10,000 on a poker tournament. Okay, I think I'd give Casino Royale a 3 out of 10 on this scene. I do like the setting with the players are dressed and the whole vibe in there, but the actual poker play itself, a bit unrealistic.
This is on the table. That's my car. Want to bet?
I'm sorry, Mr. Demetrius.
The classic table stakes versus open stakes that we see in movies all the time, which is a outdated format where players can bet cars, watches, jewelry, anything, where poker is mostly played with table stakes, meaning you can only bet the amount of money you bought in for, the chips on the table. So Bond accepts his wager there, and although this is table stakes, I will say in high stakes games, the players are in charge and have a little more latitude with the rules, I would say. So it's basically a gentleman's agreement that we're betting the car versus the amount of the car on this hand. And that wouldn't be enforced by the casino or anything, but that's just a side deal. So this could happen in theory, but I've certainly never seen this happen in the millions of hands I've played at poker.
Trip aces. Aces.
Dealer seems a little too happy about Bond winning there, where dealers are supposed to remain neutral, and she seems a little happy, a little smitten that Bond won this pot. I don't know about that. I'm gonna stick with 3 out of 10 here for Casino Royale. Both of these not realistic scenes very much. As much as I do enjoy them, I would say they're not very realistic. I'm gonna sneak in the cold deck here. So it looks like we're playing 5-card draw here again, which is common in these older movies in the Westerns to be playing 5-card draw. So this is pre-draw. So we see Paul Newman has 3 of a kind.
You're 1,000. I'll raise you 2,000.
I will say that this method of betting, where you see it a lot in movies, old-time westerns, I'll call your 500 and raise you another 1,000, or call your 1,000 and raise you more money. That is technically illegal. That's string betting, where as soon as you're going to say, I call the bet, or you put your money in the middle, then you're not allowed to raise. So if you are going to raise, your first action needs to be to raise. In reality, it would just be raise to 2,000 or something like that.
4 9s, 4 jacks.
So a bit of a cheater versus cheater scenario here, it looks like, where the player with 4 9s had kind of set up the deck or had it rigged, and Paul Newman would have 4 3s, and then Paul Newman pulled a fast one here and somehow switched in 4 jacks. A little unrealistic because cheaters are usually very attuned to what's going on and catching other players cheating because they're so used to doing it themselves. I would give this a 7 out of 10 just because the cheating can happen.
And invested. Hey Lisa, check out your college fund.
Hilarious that her screen name is Lisa Simpson College Fund. My generation, I would say, a lot of us came up playing online poker. When I first started playing, that was a big bulk of my play was online, and that's where I learned a lot of my play. And players, you're able to play many more hands online because you can play 5, 6, 10 games at once.
Read every expert on poker and watch Jennifer Tilly's DVD.
Start with your Simpsons money.
Oh, shout out Jennifer Tilly. I've played a lot of poker against her, TV games, cash games, tournaments. She is a treat to play with, love her energy at the table, and was actually married to the creator of The Simpsons, Sam Simon, I think. So funny connecting the dots, seeing her here.
Full house! Aces over 3s!
She's got $400,000 there sitting with pocket aces and just rivered a full house. So things looking good for Lisa. A lot of professional players my age had a journey similar to Lisa Simpson, where the games were good enough back then where a player could deposit $50 or $100 and end up with hundreds of thousands if you played your cards right. If only the screen actually went busted and flashed up like that, and when you actually lose, that would be great. With this scene, it is interesting that Lisa's always betting all of her money, her whole bankroll, where she starts with 5,000 and then she has 400,000 and she's betting it all on one hand, where that's not super realistic, where you're allowed to take money off the table, where you can still only put 5,000 on the table and then you can't lose the other 400. So we call that bankroll management, how much money you're risking in poker compared to how much money you have. And as a kid, you wouldn't expect she would know anything about bankroll management, so it makes sense that she would risk all of the money. And players do this. I was certainly guilty of this as a young player.
After I won, the website found out we were both under 18, so we're back to the original 5,000.
Shame.
Definitely, there has been some underage online poker that's been played. These sites would confiscate the money if they found out for sure you were playing underage. It's a bit tricky to enforce and to catch. I'll give The Simpsons a 6. This is a realistic spin-up of a bankroll online. Maybe a little unrealistic how big the stakes are and that she's playing against her brother on another account.
We're going to begin with 5-card draw.
Josh.
Yeah.
To the left. Deal to your left.
If a player was dealing and they started going to the right, that would be a telltale sign that they don't play a lot of cards, because almost any card game you're going to deal clockwise. So this is a scene where they're showing everyone's amateurs. Brad Pitt is coaching them, kind of teaching them how to play poker, I think. So that makes sense that he would deal the wrong way.
Fellas. All.
Okay.
Red.
So this is something that could happen with amateurs playing, where he thinks this is a good hand. It's just 2 diamonds, 3 hearts, no straights, no flushes, but it says all red, and he thinks it's a flush or something. And this is something that can happen with players who don't know the hand rankings or don't know how to play.
That's $500. Guys, what's the first lesson in poker?
No, leave emotion at the door.
That's right, Topher.
I think Brad Pitt coaching these guys is giving pretty good advice, and emotion, you should leave your emotion at the door. I think emotion, ego can get you in a lot of trouble in poker. And being able to play without that, more of a cold, calculated approach probably would be a good plan for a lot of players. Yeah, keeping a poker face is crucial, especially during the hand.
Call.
Call.
I'm not sure what
4 9s does, but the ace I think is pretty high.
So this is you're at the end of the hand, and George Clooney's made a bet, and all the players at the table are calling. So that's usually a good sign that there's inexperienced players in the game, or you're in a good game, because as you get towards the end of a hand, players should have an idea of where they are. Are they able to win the hand? And the more players you're playing against, the better hand you're going to need to win. Experienced players, professionals know this. Inexperienced players sometimes will get tunnel vision on their hand and not really realize that they have to beat all these other players and that they're probably better off going out. I'll give it a 5 out of 10. I think the idea of a player coaching celebrities, that could happen, something like this. The actual gameplay and the setup, I'm not sure.
I'm out.
You gentlemen mind if I take his spot?
If you play his hand.
I would prefer not to.
Uh-oh. Dead man's hand. Always a ominous forewarning or something. I feel like there's going to be a shootout or someone's going to die whenever I see it in movies. If I'm in a tournament or a cash game playing for a lot of money, no, I would not fold Dead Man's Hand just because of what happened to Wild Bill Hickok. It doesn't get mentioned too much at all, I would say, among professional poker players or circles, but a lot of hands do have nicknames like that.
You seen them, you play them.
And if I don't?
So it seems like this guy's just looking for trouble. There's no rule, of course, if you sit down at the table and look at a hand, you have to play it. Of course, you would not want to play a hand that had already been folded by somebody else.
Cards, fancy Dan.
Can't no one compel another man to engage in recreation?
Poker definitely was a big part of America in these times, 1800s, 1900s, saloons and cowboys. I think poker came to the U.S. sometime in the early 1800s, evolving from other games from Europe. I think there's a Persian game called Asnas, which uses 20 cards and is a version of 5-card stud, and Poké, a French game that came through New Orleans in the early 1800s. American settlers started playing, and the game really evolved over time because people wanted to add more rounds of betting, more cards. I guess I'd give this a 6 out of 10. The player has a realistic reaction to someone trying to make him play a hand that he doesn't have to play.
The count's still plus 16.
So this is blackjack. This is actually not poker, but makes sense that it would get thrown in here because I think the everyday person conflates poker and blackjack quite a bit. And when I tell someone I'm a professional poker player, one of the first questions I usually get is, do you count cards? Which is a blackjack method, not poker. 21, actually, a very good story. I read the books, Bringing Down the House, Busting Vegas, where this is based on a true story and pretty interesting.
Plus 12. 9, still plus 12. Blackjack.
So we see the player here keeping the count in blackjack, and although it's I think it's overblown a little bit how difficult it is to count cards in blackjack. Blackjack is just trying to get 21 without going over. So similar to poker, I would say the math required for counting cards is not difficult. It's just addition and subtraction. The difficult part is in the execution. Being subtle about your betting or your technique to be able to play as long as you can without the casino kicking you out, because that is the biggest challenge for blackjack players or card counters, because casinos want to deter players who can beat them, obviously, to play that game. And the way this system worked with this specific blackjack team, where they would go to the casino, spread out a bunch of players among these tables, and wait for favorable counts. So I think they show she puts her arms behind her back or something like that, that signals him to come over. Despite not being poker, this is a 9 out of 10. I would say this is a very realistic card counting blackjack casino scene.
Huck calls, and Ralph calls.
I think that's John. A couple cameos here from poker players. That's John Hennigan with the sunglasses, poker Hall of Famer and all-time legend. That's a good cameo for them to get there, and I think that's Matt Savage on the microphone. That's a famous tournament director as well. And this is a realistic poker tournament final table setting where I recognize the software on the computer screen there, which is something they typically use for poker tournament final tables.
Call.
Huck calls.
Ralph Kaczynski.
The applause is a little much. There's cheering, more so when players are all in, or if the cards are face up, they're cheering for certain cards. People wouldn't be like, he calls, and people wouldn't clap. I don't really think that would happen.
Ralph Kaczynski has kings and jacks, 2 pair. Huck has a set of 3s.
Kaczynski needs a king or a jack.
I mean, that's a pretty good hand, top 2 pair. Versus the set of 3s. This is a realistic showdown where, compared to some of the other films we've seen, this is something that in Hold'em, these hands could happen at a reasonable clip and the money would go in. So this is a more realistic depiction of poker.
Kings. Nice hand.
They're good. Woo! LC Cheever wins the pot.
He mucks the winner. So I guess the story is their father-son, I think, in this movie, and he's letting his dad win. I guess is the storyline there. You can't do that in poker, though, especially that particular hand. The dad is all in. The son calls. You have to turn over both hands in a tournament. They actually have a rule to prevent collusion where in all-in pots, both hands should be turned over. So he wouldn't really be allowed to just throw it in the muck. The dealer would stop that and turn his hand over probably. I would give this an 8 out of 10. I think that the setting is realistic. The clapping and the collusion folding the winner on the end, I have to dock it a few points.
Now, I'll bet I can change your mind. I promise that I will lose for at least an hour.
So Maverick declares he's going to play and he's going to lose for the first hour. So losing for an hour to watch everybody's tells, I can't really get behind it just from a tell perspective, but there is something to it of just observing the action for an hour, because you do get to watch how the players play, how much they're betting. It's not just the tells, so there is more to be gained than just the body language. So there is something to that. And pro players, maybe early in a tournament or a cash game, they may call a bet just to see an opponent's cards if they don't know that opponent, to get more information for later. So that is something that is real, making a small investment early that might pay off later in the form of a bigger win. Here we see little tells that might be he might be picking up on there. That's Jodie Foster's character there. That's called a pacifying behavior. When you touch your neck there, that's something that someone can do when they're nervous. There's little nerve endings there that by touching them kind of calms your body down. And there's tons of different spots on your body where players can do that when they feel nervous or uncomfortable. But that's certainly one of them.
Oh, shit, that fold. Hey, you never paid to look.
Really bad etiquette to what this player's done here is Mel Gibson's won the hand and mucked his cards, so slid them face down, and this player reaches across the table, turns them over, and he hasn't called the bet on the river or the end. Something I have seen over the years in casinos, if a player does this in a tournament, they would get a penalty, though. I've seen 2-round, 3-round penalties for this, where frowned upon, as it's poker considered a gentleman's game, and you should be able to safely slide your cards face down and not have to worry about someone flipping them over. I would give this a 7 out of 10. I think he's clearly the most skilled player at the table, tells him he's going to lose on purpose, collects some information, and then beats them. I don't know if he would be throwing it in their face like that. My favorite poker movie is Rounders, just because I think it portrays the poker scene in the best light and the most realistic light, the underground poker scene. I really aspired. I watched that as a kid, and I wanted to play for that much money, and I think it's awesome. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, click the next video.